Can your yurt lattice do this? How about that? Maybe some of this? No, of course it can't. I built the first yurt lattice that can. Look at it. It's supporting a second floor. No ugly studs. No snow and wind kit. This is a lattice that's strong as heck. You want to see how I did it? Stick around.
Today I cover the process of building the lattice for a 44-foot yurt, starting from raw sawmill planks and ending with a one-of-a-kind red oak lattice that's strong enough to eliminate the need for snow and wind kits. I built the biggest yurt on the internet, alone in my shop over the course of 5 months, and I filmed it all to show you how you can too. The plan for the mega yurt is simple. Build a 16-foot diameter yurt, then build a 44-foot diameter yurt, and smash them together. Earlier in the series, I covered the construction of the 16-foot yurt's wooden frame components and skylight, and the 44-foot yurt's massive compression ring. Today, we dive deep into what it takes to make your own yurt lattice. But first, it's always prudent to ask yourself when designing something, what do I need this to do for me, and what do I want it to do for me? And then we can go about deciding how to achieve those goals. The first and most obvious thing that we need is for the lattice to support the weight of the roof without collapsing. We need to be able to design it to fit materials that we can conveniently source. We need it to be able to be transported and set up by hand. We want to eliminate snow and wind kits. We want to support a second floor without studs. We want the lattice to look beautiful, and we want to keep the price to a minimum. In designing a lattice that won't collapse under the roof load, as a solo designer and builder, it is important that you learn how to properly stand on the shoulders of giants. This means we can take advantage of all the engineering reports and testing done by the large yurt manufacturers that we don't have the budget for ourselves. If we can take their design and make it even stronger, we know we have a solid and dependable wall. Unfortunately, those tight asses aren't exactly publishing the exact dimensions of their lattice. It's almost like they don't want you to build your own instead of buying theirs. So we have to do some snooping and detective work. It's obvious that no manufacturer is using lattice thicker than 1 inch. Some list 7/8 of an inch thick, others 3/4, and many DIY builders have gone even thinner to 1/2 inch or even 1/4 inch. The raw sawmill lumber is typically over 1 inch thick, and after planing off the rough faces, comes in right at 1 inch. And shaving down more thickness requires more work, so we'll leave it there. Typical manufacturers will have 1.5 inch wide lattice. Let's bump ours up to 2 inches wide, just for good measure. The expandable nature of the lattice construction means that as you open the lattice wider, the wall gets shorter, or as the angle of lattice intersection increases, you need longer lattice to make the same height wall. Consider these two yurt designs. They both have a 7-foot wall height, but the one on the left can be made from 8-foot lumber, while the one on the right requires 10-foot long lattice pieces. Also, they have different number and spacing of holes. Traditional yurts use closer to a 90-degree angle and thinner lattice that tends to flex out somewhat, combating the circular hyperboloid shape that squeezes the yurt wall into a slim-looking waist shape at the extremes. I have found 45-degree angle works out very well. It means you can achieve a 7-foot wall height with 8-foot lumber, or as we are in this case, you can achieve a 9-foot wall height with 10-foot lumber. Some yurt manufacturers offer a 10-foot wall height, and in order to achieve that, we would need to move to a different species of wood that can be sourced in 12-foot lengths. I mentioned before, and in a previous video, that I chose to use red oak for the lattice. I also said one of our needs was for the lattice to be designed around materials that we can conveniently source. No other yurt manufacturer is using hardwood for their lattice. Don't even talk to me about poplar. It may technically be a hardwood, but it's more like a softwood. And for good reason. Hardwood dulls the blades and tools faster, it's heavier, it has worse strength to weight ratio, and it's harder to find in clear, straight grain. That means that the big yurt companies go for easier solutions. But I only want and need to sell a handful of yurts a year to feed my family, so I can use those hardwoods. I can search through the piles for the straight grain pieces, and I can work through that added difficulty in order to deliver a product that you can't get anywhere else, unless you're prepared to make it yourself. And I want to show you how to do that too. One day I dream of a black walnut lattice for a yurt. But for the mega yurt, I went with red oak. It is the cheapest hardwood available at my local mill. However, it is only available in lengths up to 8 feet long, unless you special order it. And in order to special order 10-foot red oak, I had to buy 1,000 board feet. When I went to pick it up at the mill, about 30% of the stack was 9 feet long instead of 10 feet, and was not suitable for the lattice. So the mill gave me a discount, and I got all the wood for $1.60 a board foot, or $1,600. Don't worry, I'm going to use that 9-foot oak to build the massive hobbit door to serve as the beautiful entrance to the one-of-a-kind yurt. Video coming soon. This did, however, leave me in a predicament. The 30% of the stack that I can't use was meant to be the excess that allowed me to be more selective about the straight grain. Since I'm going to have much less excess, we're going to have to accept some larger knots and voids than we would have otherwise. Luckily, the nature of the lattice being bolted to many other pieces means that individual knots or weak spots are isolated, and they are much less likely to be able to break. You may notice that I am also using boards with warping or cupping. Once we get them all bolted together, that warping will all but disappear. In this way, we can minimize waste and cost at the same time, while also being more sustainable and mindful of the trees that gave their lives to become this valuable resource. Why did I need 10-foot long red oak in the first place? Well, the mega yurt is 44 feet in diameter, and I'm planning for a second floor. The typical 7-foot wall height isn't going to leave much headroom for a second floor, especially with a roof angle of 30 degrees. Going to 10-foot red oak allows me to build a lattice wall that is 9 feet tall, giving room for 8-foot ceilings on the first floor, while still maintaining significant headroom for the second floor. It is possible to go to 10 feet or even 12 feet for the wall height, and if you are interested in owning something like that, reach out to me at theyurtcollective@gmail.com and let me build you the mega yurt of your dreams that is as unique as you are, and you can flex the features of your yurt that aren't available anywhere else. Whether you're looking for a version of the mega yurt, the double yurt construction with a crow's nest, or a more traditional style yurt but built to your own specifications, we can design something together from the ground up. I don't have to pay dozens of office workers or employees either. It's just me, and I can help pass those savings on to you. I'd love to work together. In all honesty, I am really passionate about yurts and yurt innovation. With the surging cost of housing and with more and more people unable to afford a quality home, I do see yurts as a true solution to that problem. Many people are held back from making the leap and purchasing a yurt because of some of the obvious issues that come from living in a regular yurt. I know all about those. I built my first yurt at 22 years old, and I lived in it for the last 8 years. It was constantly drafty. The roof-to-wall intersection lets in tons of air, and even at 70-degree temperatures inside, a cold blast of drafty air makes the yurt way less comfortable in the winter. Same issue with where the wall fabric meets the platform. Very drafty areas, both of which I eliminated in my new yurt design. It was hard to heat and cool. It required a constant source of heat in the winter and near constant air conditioning in the summer. The lack of insulation meant that if the stove shut off, it would rapidly cool down in the yurt. I ran a pellet stove, but I imagine feeding a wood stove in the middle of the night when the yurt temp is dropping below 50 because the fire went out isn't the best feeling. I figured out how to use modern fiberglass insulation in a yurt, providing a constant R24 with no thermal bridging. This is unheard of in a yurt, and better R values than almost every stick-built traditional house you've ever been in. And the proof is in the pudding. It's been exactly a year since the mega yurt was erected, and the insulation has had a chance to perform in all 4 seasons. I'll go over the details in its own video, but I am very excited to share my findings with you all. I've had people in my life tell me that I should seek patents or trademarks for these innovations. And it's a good time to take a minute to lay out the mission of this channel and some of my personal philosophy. The main mission of this channel is to make yurts more accessible, more affordable, better quality, and more capable of adapting to a modern lifestyle. I'm sick and tired of the corporate lingo and jargon. I'm not trying to build some big company here. I'm trying to reach individuals who are thinking about making the leap and building or buying a yurt, and give them every resource to make that easier and better. A good businessman would patent an innovation, refusing to allow anyone else to benefit from it if he isn't making a profit. But a good person and a friend would tell you about the mistakes they made and the successes they had, just to help you in your journey. There is no gatekeeping here, no hidden insider secrets. If you want to be a part of a community that inspires and lifts each other and is always seeking to help others over profit, then hit the follow button, because you've found a home. But moving our attention back to the task at hand, I will give any aspiring lattice makers the best tips that I can from my experience in doing this. These are in no particular order. If you're going to follow in my footsteps and use a hardwood like oak, buy the dang bench planer. I've been using my DeWalt planer for all of this lattice, and it is a beast. Planing and routing the edges makes a huge difference in the end build quality. I plan to allow my kids to climb all over the walls like a jungle gym, and I don't want them getting splinters. Next, wear eye and ear protection whenever you can. You may not see it, but I use my earplugs every time I run a tool. Hearing loss is permanent, and earplugs are cheap. I should also be wearing a mask with all of this dust. Don't be like me. Wear the mask. And maybe get someone to help you. This is the most labor-intensive portion of the yurt build because of all of the raw wood processing. I got help at the assembly portion, but an extra hand through this process will be of great help. And for your first yurt, keep the math easy. I don't cover a ton of the specific figures in these videos because each yurt is so different. I would prefer you understand the philosophy of the design and how and why you might modify it to better suit your needs, rather than copying my design blindly when my design might not be the best for you. However, for those who might want to follow my design, I do have an interesting idea for the intrepid yurt builder who maybe isn't fully ready to tackle the design and engineering element. I could make one piece of lattice and one rafter and send them to you, and then you could use them as a template to make all the rest that you need. In that way, you can save a ton of money on not having to buy or ship the lattice. You can make all of that yourself. Maybe you still want me to make the outer cover. Maybe you still want me to make the compression ring. I'm willing to step in and build any part of any yurt as long as we can work together through the design process and I understand all of the dimensions. Buy or borrow a drill press. While it is possible to drill all of these holes by hand, the more accurate the holes are, the easier aligning and assembly will go. Also, for that reason, over-drill the holes 1/32 or a 1/16 of an inch. If you have to jam the bolts through the holes, they will collect a bunch of wood on the threads, and then the nuts will not easily thread on. Ask me how I know. I use 1/4-inch hex bolts and nuts for my lattice. Of course, the traditional Mongolian gur, from which the modern design is loosely based, would have used natural rope or cordage. From my research, most of the big yurt manufacturers are using some type of rivet. The rivets are flush on both sides and will never come loose, but they come with a few downsides in my opinion. The first being that it is a specialized fastener needing a special tool. Anyone can buy replacement 1/4-inch bolts for my lattice at any hardware store in the country, and they can put them on with basic tools. The bolts are much more accessible, and when the yurt is in its expanded form, the bolts can be tightened down, providing an additional layer of strength that the rivets, which remain loose enough for easy lattice opening and closing, can't match. By adding a lock washer, we ensure that no bolts or nuts will come loose. Also, the lattice bolt holes can be used as locations for coat hooks, eye bolt anchors for hammocks. The options are endless. Just remove the existing bolt and bolt on whatever you choose in its place. I ordered all of my fasteners in bulk online from Fasteners Plus. The total for all the hardware for the 44-foot yurt and the 16-foot Yurt Lattice was $492. $1,600 for the longwood, and just about $400 for the 8-foot oak means that all in on the lattice for both yurts, we are at $2,500. Guy math is knowing that if you save enough money making your own lattice, then the tools you bought to do it are basically free. Hello, new planer and table saw. In reality, I did buy a new table saw and planer to process all this wood, and it was well worth it. My old table saw gave up and started to smell of burning electric motor at some point in this lattice cutting, and I found a decent replacement on Marketplace for under $500. The planer was $700, but I have since used it to make several custom woodwork pieces that have made it more than pay for itself. Being able to invest in quality tools is a luxury I have done without in the past, and I have often scoffed at the fancy woodworkers and all their tools. Didn't they know you could get a whole heck of a lot done with just some basic tools? Now I think they probably did know. But if you are poor, you can solve many problems by working harder and less comfortably. You can process all this lattice down with just a circular saw and a hand drill. It's a lot more work, but if you can't afford the tools, it's better than not being able to at all. I'll always commend those who make do with less. This was my setup building my first yurt. Harbor Freight chop saw, cheap desks as a work surface. You could build a yurt in a shed or a garage if you had to. But you won't hear me crying for the good old days. The new shop setup is amazing. I worked hard to design it to be a useful space built around yurt manufacturing and larger woodworking pieces. Remember, I have never made a dime from yurts. It's all still a passion project for me. I still make a living doing carpentry and construction. This channel is my attempt to change that and to get out of the field and spend more time in the shop and closer to my family. Being home on time for dinner and being able to sit down to eat lunch with my wife and child are a distant dream that yurt building might help me achieve. For this kind of shop work, it's important to achieve a good flow state. I never work in silence. I either have music, an audiobook, or YouTube playing. Music over the speakers, audiobooks or YouTube if I'm wearing headphones. It is amazing the difference in my mood when music is playing. I work longer with less distractions. Another pro tip is to take a time-lapse video of yourself. It's like having an eye in the sky to be accountable to. You don't want to stand still for too long or the time-lapse will show it. I don't know, it works for me. In case you haven't pieced it together yet, the lattice creation the way I do it is an 8-part process. Every time you switch between processes, you lose time. I try to process as much as I can in one stage before moving on to a different tool or setup. The 8-part process is: cut a straight edge using my homemade track saw, use the table saw to rip each board into 2-inch pieces, plane all 4 sides of the board to remove the rough sawmill face, mark and drill all the holes, cut each end, 3 cuts in total, including a small relief cut to avoid splitting the lattice bottoms, round over all 4 edges, apply a generous coat of tung oil, and assemble and bolt the lattice pieces together. When it comes time to bolt them together, I will only go hand tight, which will leave the lattice easy to open into its expanded state on yurt raising day, and once in position, the nuts can be tightened. You may have noticed I bought 1,500 bolts. That's why I had to ask for help in assembly. It is a mind-numbingly tedious process to insert and hand tighten that many bolts and nuts. With help from my family, I was able to finish in an afternoon what would have taken me an entire day or two to do solo. Don't be afraid to reach out to your circle for help. I often find it overwhelmingly difficult to ask for help. So much of my self-worth comes from being independent and capable, and it can feel like a failing to need to ask. I'm learning to accept that it isn't a failing. It is the most human thing to need help, and we can all give from our cups when they are full. so that in our time of need, we can ask others to pour a little back into our cup. That's looking a little empty. Community and family are so important. Well, we finally made it to the most satisfying part of the video, oiling and assembly. It is such a nice feeling seeing the grain take the oil and shine after all the hard work we did to get here. Look closely at the bottoms of the lattice pieces. You'll see the small relief cut there, but you'll also notice that half of the boards are marked with an F. The F stands for front, and those boards are the ones that will be facing in on the inside of the yurt. I hand-selected the most beautiful face of each piece of lattice and cut half of them at the opposite angle to make sure that any imperfections or less desirable faces are hidden facing the cover of the yurt where no one can see them. I only used tung oil for the lattice. I used it on my first yurt, and the wood still looks just as good as it did a decade ago without ever needing a second coat. It's also a food-safe and non-toxic finish that I can feel good about using in my home with my child, my dog and cat, and my hopefully soon-to-be pregnant wife. It's not too expensive, easy to apply with a basic rag, doesn't have any harsh odor, and does a wonderful job of preserving the wood. It does tend to add a yellowish hue, but I think it's a beautiful look that complements the natural red oak. We talked about a drawback of using hardwood being its added weight. Because of that, we will be splitting the lattice into 4 panels of roughly equal size for assembly. 4 men can somewhat easily manage to lift and maneuver a single panel. It could be broken down further into more panels, with the only drawback being more assembly needed on yurt raising day. We assemble the panels sideways, so it's easier to reach all of the bolts without ladders. After the first 2 panels are assembled, they get moved off of the mount and we build the second set of panels. Those will go much faster. With all 4 panels assembled, we come to the end of all of the lattice building portion of the mega yurt. Want to see how it looks?
Well, there it is. If you want to make the strongest lattice on the internet, you can too. If you made it this far, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you around